some will say, and some will preach, that one of our most, I wouldn't say precious, but one of our more important guiding American principles is the idea of the separation of church and state, so that we compartmentalize, meaning that we have a place for our religion, and then we have a place for our government. And so the two don't interfere with one another, so that you can practice your religion privately as long as it does not affect the other people, and that's where the government would come in. But this idea is very alien to the Orthodox Church, and this is not something that she has ever believed in, okay? Now, that is not to mean that this has not been without difficulties, all right? And so in ancient times, and I'm talking about the times of the great fathers of the church, it was the emperor who was the guardian of the church, making sure that he kept the people of the church, the ecclesia, the gathering, that he kept them safe. But it was the bishop's job to make sure that he guarded the truth. And this is why we say in the liturgy, and this is why St. John Chrysostom put it in there, is that it is important that we ask that God keep our archbishop in health for many years, rightly, and we say dividing the word of your truth, meaning that he protects the truth. So when the state now does things that are contrary to the rock of faith, it is the bishop's job then to now say something about it. And this was the relationship. That was a very rocky relationship sometimes. You know, as most of you who work in a corporate setting, it is not always the easiest thing to do to walk into the executive manager's office and tell him that he is doing things wrong. It's not the easiest thing. And it certainly was not the easiest thing for the bishops, because many times they were exiled for the things, the truth that they preached. Okay? But this was a check and balance that was important. And so here in America, Orthodoxy always influences the decisions that we make in government. And what are those decisions that we make? Those decisions we make are who we vote for. Now, the church never endorses one candidate over the other, and that discussion can never happen from the pulpit. But the church can say what it is, what are those things that we can look for so that we can be guardians of the truth. Now, just as in ancient times, there wasn't the idea that there was the perfect candidate. So certainly many of the emperors that we had in the Byzantine Empire were not the best people necessarily. Some were good, some were not so good. It's the fact of life. We who are unfortunately under the influence of sin, have been darkened by sin, it's impossible for us to be purely good. There's good in us, but not to be purely good. So we struggle with those decisions, meaning that there is no perfect candidate. But what we have to look for are, what are those bedrock truths? What are those rocks or foundations that we need to look for in our faith? Now, how am I tying that in with today's gospel? So in today's gospel, we have the Pharisee, and we all get down on the Pharisee without thinking about ourselves. And the Pharisee stood and prayed thusly, God, I thank you that I am not like other men, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. All right? So we get down on the Pharisee and we praise the publican, right? But as Jesus said, before you cast judgment on someone, take now the log out of your own eye, which means that we should also look at ourselves. And sometimes there are candidates throughout our American history who have this idea that we know better than any other country. So we have to be careful in terms of many of the things that the candidate that we vote for believes in. All right? So we have to weigh their principles against the principles of the church. And one of those principles is the fact that we work in harmony with other countries, that we don't take sides for one or the other, but when there are injustices that happen, those are things that we as a country should be helping our neighbor. And those are the decisions as voters that we need to make. That's how we can be the guardians of truth, so that we're not like the Pharisee that says, I know what's best in all the other countries of the world, and so I'm going to vote for that guy or that woman, and because what they're going to do is they're going to take care of all of this. But we always begin as Christians from the position of love. We start with love, and then we move from there. Again, there's no perfect candidate. But what we can do as voters, as guardians of the truth, to preserve the legacy that the Holy Fathers have left us, is to make sure that our faith influences our government. That's our responsibility. It is not my responsibility to tell you how to vote or who you should vote for, but it is my responsibility from the church's position to tell you that we must influence through our truths what is the best, not only for our country, but what is the best way that our country must then engage with the rest of the world.